cities are new, that means they are built and developed based on, new standards. It's a lot easier to install that dank RGB lighting when you're building a building in an era where that technology has been better fleshed out.
Oh, okay. So you're not saying that like, you're saying that China, the cities, they look great because they're new. Okay, well, yeah, no shit. American cities don't look good because they're not new. Well, that's not really the whole story. Okay, no. American cities don't look good because they haven't been taken care of. Because our leaders, right, our state legislators, our local municipalities have neglected them. Wow, why did that happen, Mentis? Would you like to explain that one for me? Anyway, now we're reacting to MentisWave.
You know who Jackson Hinkle is? He's basically a Knott's Bowl leaning.
I know who Jackson Hinkle is. Okay, he's the guy that did MAGA communism. I'm pretty sure, right? Anybody remember that? Yeah. Wow, what a great success that was, and everybody knew it was gonna be a great success. Yeah, that's him. Yep. Alright, let's see. For anybody that is fortunate enough to not know, Jackson Hinkle is a self-proclaimed Marxist or something. I don't even know. I don't even know if he calls himself that, but he's a communist, basically. And his idea was like, yo, what if we got MAGA people to be communist with we just call it MAGA communism? But genius, yeah, that's gonna work, bro. Yeah, wow, okay, obviously that was fucking incredibly stupid, incredibly dumb. Okay, but they actually were like trying it. They were like trying to do something with it. I don't know. It didn't really work on any level. I think they had like a podcast or something, or they had like and they tried like interviewing people at MAGA rallies, and it was so dumb, man. It was like they can fucking, and this is why internet leftists. Okay, like the difference between these guys and the average internet leftist is that they actually like tried to do something. Okay, they didn't just sit there, and complain. Which, I gotta give them credit there, right? They tried something, I guess. But like, I don't know what theory they were applying, but like, dude, stop reading. Just stop reading books. Like, it's not for you, man. Just like, go be a foot soldier or something. Like, clearly, you are not meant to be the guy. Like, you are not the fucking intellectual. Okay, you're not. Okay, so just stop trying to be that. Don't be that. You're not the movement builder. Okay, holy shit. MAGA communism. I'm gonna say it again. MAGA communism. That's what they came up with.
Conservative communist and co-founder of the American Communist Party, who, like many take he's wanting.
Yeah, see, I don't really understand conservative communist. That's an oxymoron. That doesn't make any fucking sense. Not in this country. Not in any country. Conservative communist, like. You're either failing to understand conservatism or you're failing to understand communism. And I'm gonna be real, in this guy's case, it's probably the former.
Communism can work, have been desperately clinging to China as if it's the ultimate example of communist success. In fact, Hinkle's pretty much been doing this.
Because like these guys, what I said earlier about them like needing to stop reading books, like I wasn't even joking. Okay, I know it sounded like a joke, but like. These guys, I think they are well read. Like, I could be wrong. I don't know. I'm kind of a dumbass, right? But from what I saw and heard from them, they like seem to have a solid grasp about what Marxist theory is, what like the application looks like. They just got it so abhorrently wrong in their own application. It makes no sense to me, but and that's the part that confuses me. But Anyway, I think they just probably fundamentally misunderstand conservatism, or they were trying to grift and failed spectacularly, because who the fuck is that grift for? Like,
every single day,
no
it's
one.
rare a day goes by that he doesn't post effectively the exact same post. This post that just consists of a claim that China is proof that communism works, alongside either a picture or most of the time a video of some Chinese skyline at night. Sometimes it's Shenzhen, or it could be Shanghai or Guangzhou. Doesn't really matter which one it is, all the posts are effectively the same. Just about every day, ad nauseum. Now, even though I have already made a longer
Yeah, so the reason that this doesn't work with Americans is because Americans don't see China as free. Because China is not liberal enough. Okay, they have some liberal sentiments, unironically, but they just aren't all about protection from the government, and like no matter how nice China is, which it is pretty nice. Okay, it looks nice, people there are pretty happy. It doesn't matter, because they're the way Americans see it, they're not free. They are enslaved because they don't have the liberal foundation. They don't have civil liberties, okay? No matter what, and don't be fooled. Like, even though conservatives, they complain about the libtards all the fucking time, that is what they like about America. They like the liberal foundation, right? That's what they're constantly comparing other countries to. They're like, oh, they don't have the protection from the government, right? Right? They, like, a lot of them don't even realize that's fucking liberalism. That's what that is. That's the founding fathers, okay? That was like their whole thing, was fucking liberalism. They were smarmy and annoying about it, just like modern day liberals, okay? Anyway, China doesn't have that shit, but it is still a nice place to live, from what I can tell. But you're not going to convince the average American of that. So that's why this shit doesn't work. Okay. That being said, though, I remember now what I wanted to say. Okay. You can use China in like your rhetoric. Okay. You can say to Americans like what I'm saying, which is I like our civil liberties, but look at these things that China is doing, and look at how it's improving their society. Okay, we don't need to get rid of liberalism in our country. We don't need to throw away the Constitution or whatever. But look at what China is doing and think like, wow, it looks nice over there. How can we do that? How can we do that here? Without becoming an authoritarian regime dictatorship or what the fuck ever. Like, that's it.
Why trying to claim that China is successful communism is a very, very false claim.
China is successful. They are extremely successful, especially recently. And they aren't truly communist, right? I know, typical communist saying, no true Scotsman. But like, we are not really capitalist. Okay, so like no country, no society is like fully anything. Okay, they're not. We're all like a mixture. Okay? So like America, we may be capitalist, right? That's how we label ourselves. That's how other societies label us. But we do have some welfare. And that's not capitalism. That's not free market. No. That is socialism. That is communism or whatever. It is. It's not capitalism. So, in the same way, China, they may not be communist. Okay, they're not. Because they have private markets. Right? They started privatizing markets way back in the 70s, I think. And it really started to ramp up in the 80s with the privatization of healthcare. Okay? So that's how it works.
We'll have a quick rant video as well that more specifically focuses on just the point that Hinkle is trying to push here, of saying, oh wow, look how advanced these cities look, therefore communism works. And I'll be showing why this is not only entirely false, but we will understand exactly why this take from Hinkle is false. You'll realize that these hot RGB Chinese skylines are actually one of the biggest experiments proving that communism does not work. So let's just get started with asking, okay, why do these cities look like this? Well, there's three reasons as to why. The first and most obvious is that these cities are actually just kind of new. Most Chinese cities really only started looking like this at the end of the 20th century or towards the beginning of the 21st century. If you look at photos of, say, New York City and compare them to photos of Chinese cities in the 1900s or even early 1900s,
no, I mean like the early 1900s. What?
Of the 21st century. If you look at photos of, say, New York City and compare them to photos of Chinese cities in the mid 1900s or even early 1900s.
or what? Dog, do you know what you're saying right now? What the fuck are you talking about? Mid 20th century. They didn't industrialize until the 50s. They didn't even fucking there were no cities. They lived on fucking rice farms and shit. That was 99% of Chinese society. Okay, and I'm not exaggerating with that. Like they literally, most of them lived on farms. They grew their own food. They were an agriculture-based society until the 50s, dog. The fucking 1950s. They rapidly industrialized. So like even when you say the late 20th century, no, their cities weren't like impressive. Okay, these brand new cities that they built within the last like 15 years. Okay, is when they like started construction, I think. Maybe less than that, maybe more like 10 years. Okay, I remember hearing about these ghost cities, these ghost skyscrapers, way back in like 2014. Okay, so they probably started constructing them a few years earlier. All right, so they've been building these cities for like 15 years. They're all brand new. This is true. Okay, so then how did they do that, Mentis? How did they do that? Because communism failed? Because communism failed so hard?
Big difference. So for
Really?
the United States, let's take a look at the Times Square. Here's a photo of New York City in the mid-1900s, and here's that same area of the Times Square today. And while there is definitely some differences here, you'll notice it's not huge differences. It's really just been updated for current modern technology. More lights, more billboards, more businesses, more electricity. And of course, some differences in culture that have
big
happened throughout the
screens,
years,
yeah.
for better or for worse. While technology
Cool.
in the mid-1900s version is obviously not as advanced, it hasn't really changed horribly. But for the most part, it's pretty well developed. If you look at this at a very quick 1-second glance, you might be able to convince yourself that it's a modern photo. It becomes obvious that it isn't when you look at the cars for more than just a glance. They're very obviously mid-1900s cars. But it at least kind of passes the glance test. Whereas China, on the other hand, if you look at this from Travel China on Instagram, we suddenly see quite the transformation. A lot of these Chinese skylines that we're seeing being posted by Inkle back in the mid-1900s, they were either sparsely populated farming towns.
Yeah, okay, yeah, you're making sense now. Alright, this is making
With
sense.
almost no development at all, or they were poorly
Wow.
run shanty towns that very clearly show the typical signs of a poor country. The buildings look cheap, poorly planned, and almost as if they're rotting. And so you could easily tell yourself, okay, waking up in New York in 1950s, that wouldn't be so bad of a life. Whereas you probably wouldn't say the same thing about China in the 1900s. And why is that relevant?
Why is that relevant? Why is that relevant? Tell me, Mentis. Let's hear
Because
it.
these cities are new, that means they were built and developed based on, new standards. It's a lot easier to install that dank RGB lighting when you're building the building in an era where that technology has been better fleshed out.
Oh, okay. So you're not saying that like you're saying that China, the cities, they look great because they're new. Okay, well yeah, no shit. American cities don't look good because they're not new. Well, that's not really the whole story. Okay, no. American cities don't look good because they haven't been taken care of. Because our leaders, right, our state legislators, our local municipalities have neglected them. Wow, why did that happen, Mentis? Would you like
That's
to
pretty much it. But
explain
that,
that
of course,
one
brings us to
for
another
me?
question, which brings us to our second reason. Why are these buildings so new? Why didn't China build them until the later half of the 20th century? Why did China wait so long?
Because they didn't industrialize until the
to
1950s,
actually have
Mentis.
real, somewhat decent urban development. And that's where we run into the first major problem of what Jackson Hinkle is trying to push here. Economic growth.
Sorry, they didn't start industrializing until the 1950s. They didn't even start.
In China during the rise of the Chinese Communist Party was effectively zero back then, thus stalling any real serious Chinese urban development plans until after Mao Zedong passed away. This is why quite possibly the most insane communist lie that still persists and Pinky's still pushed today is trying to say that China reduced the most amount of global poverty. Well, the reason China was able to reduce the most amount of global poverty is because nearly all of the global poverty back then in the later half of the 20th century was in China. If you look at China's privatization graph of their economy and look at their poverty graph at around roughly the same time frame.
Yeah, why was that? Could it have been because of the former leadership in China? Why were they doing that? Why were they keeping everybody in the peasant class, I wonder? Why was that, Mentis? Wait, you're telling me that rich people in another country intentionally kept everyone poor so that they could keep more for themselves and hoard more wealth? Huh.
You will see that they are clearly reverses of each other.
Wow.
It's kind of like patting yourself on the back for coming in last in the race by rewording it as saying, hey, I ran the longest. It's a completely ridiculous argument to make. It's just
Okay, no, it's not like that at all, bro. Because we're talking about building fucking mega cities. Yeah, what China did is incredibly impressive. Everybody in China was poor, and then they did communism, and they started rapidly industrializing. And then America was like, you can't trade with anyone anymore. Fuck you. And then China was like, all right. And they tried to get by for a few decades. And then finally China was like, you know, we would like to alter the deal. we would like you to reconsider. Okay. So then China, what did they do? They started privatizing markets, and America graciously, magnanimously allowed them to trade with other countries again. Wow. Thanks, America. And then China, through sheer will and strength, they managed to claw their way out of the hole that they had dug themselves in. And that's impressive, man. Why are you even why can't you just admit that? Like, you don't even have to say, like, communism is good. You could just say that, like, the people did it. Or like, the government, like, forcing them to work for menial wages did it, which is somewhat accurate. Okay, if you were to say that, I would say that's not the whole story, you know, yada yada. But yeah, like, you could just do that. And that would be, that wouldn't really be contradictory to your worldview.
To avoid the reason as to why. If you are in the top 10 countries for size and population, and your country is the last country to develop itself to the point where its global poverty rating holds steady at below 5%, well, during that time frame where they were the last country to do that, well, then of course they're going to be the ones who reduce the most amount of global poverty. It's an amazingly stupid argument when you realize the trick behind it. Which then brings us to the third reason. Okay, so what changed after Zedong fell? Well, next up came the reign of Deng Xiaoping, and under his rule in the CCP in the late 1970s, China established what you can call special economic zones. These were experimental areas where they had significantly relaxed market regulations. Or in other words, these were zones where they would abolish their communist policies.
Capitalism.
The market would function. And so while these areas would still be under the wing of the CCP, these areas were now under a capitalist experiment. And so more free trade, reduced taxes, less rules against foreign investment, less CCP meddling and bureaucracy, and privatization of industry. Or to put it simply, the special economic zones.
Yes, and see what Mentis is going to say here is that they used capitalism. They abused the capitalism. They did it. They like had these they had these contained capitalist units or nodes, whatever he'll call them, economic zones, which eventually allowed the country to flourish. Okay, and that I'm saying that is inaccurate. Okay, these economic zones were actually just modes of exploitation for capitalists overseas. Okay, and also, I'm not just saying like within the regions themselves, the economic zones, but they allowed the exploitation of all Chinese people. Okay, and they did this for the purpose of generating wealth. Okay, like Lenin said. Okay, you must basically a country that is communist, it must accumulate lots of wealth to then redistribute it to its people and the broader global population. Okay, that's what he said, and that is who Mao respected the most, right? Probably more than anyone, maybe. So anyway, that was always the plan, and that's what they did. And at the same time, they had to do it so that they could trade on the global stage once again, which America had stopped them from doing because they dared to try a different economic policy from them.
Was basically just
how dare you?
Capitalism, but only in specific areas of China, not China as a whole. And so then, of course, you might be wondering, okay, well, what were these special economic zones? Where were these areas that the CCP decided to allow some capitalism? Well, here's a map of the special economic zones right here. Places like Shenzhen, Shanghai, and a bunch of coastal areas like Guangzhou. Yep, that's pretty much it. Quite a few zones, actually. And now, you might remember from the start of this video that those names might sound a little bit familiar to you, which then brings us to this. Here's a map of the places that Jackson Hinkle is largely pulling from when he's posting videos of the Chinese skyline. And now, of course, you might be wondering, wait a minute, Mentis, this is exactly the same map as the map you just showed where China decided to try capitalism. And you would be correct. Yes, it is exactly the same map, at least for the most part. The vast majority of the time when Jackson Hinkle is posting these Chinese skylines, he is showing you a video of a skyline of a city where the Chinese Communist Party stepped away from and allowed capitalism as an experiment. In other words, it's the largest scale experiment that it's capitalism that works. The communists stepping away and allowing a free market capitalist economy to flourish in certain areas.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah, the Chinese had nothing to do with the Chinese government had nothing to do with the constructions of these cities. Yeah, for sure. Have you ever considered that maybe there's a reason why you put economic zones on the coast? Have you ever considered that maybe separately there's a reason why you put your population centers on the coast, to Doi.
But within the same country, thus controlling for ethnicity, culture, education, etc., etc. And so the normal commie cope of saying embargoes or something like that, where they claim that a communist country only failed because of embargoes like Cuba, well, those kind of ridiculous excuses don't work here anymore, because it's within the same freaking country. And so when Hinkle is posting these videos and saying this is proof that communism works, he is showing you a video of a skyline of a city in China that was designated as a special economic zone where they would no longer be operating under communist policies, but instead were operating under capitalist policies. And the only exception...
Yeah, famously, China never experienced sanctions or embargoes from America. Yeah, never happened. Yeah, famously.
It's a city that wasn't an SEZ, it's a city that's within the same metro area, and so that's the economically benefited from the same policy, as opposed to showing pictures of inland China that were not anywhere near these SEZs, because of course, a lot of them still have dirt roads and are poorly developed and effectively still look like a third world country. And yes, that is completely as ridiculous as it sounds. When you understand the trick and history behind it, it becomes obvious that this is an absolutely insane lie. Which then brings us to our bonus question. If it's such an obviously false narrative that Hinkle is pushing here, then why is he pushing it? And well, that's exactly the reason why he's pushing it. One of the most bizarre and most brazen tactics of communists is to proudly and boldly tell absolutely insane lies through their teeth, while completely ignoring all evidence to the contrary. You can kind of think of it as a tactic of, okay, if we just scream our lies loud enough and hard enough and long enough, our lies will block out the sound of truth. It's a tactic entirely designed to just drown out the refutations. The fact that Hinkle's point here is just an obviously false narrative actually in some ways is to his benefit, because an average, normal, responsible person...
Yeah, but famously, conservatives never lie. Unless it's about gay people, or trans people, or black people, or immigrants, or women, or abortion doctors, or I could go on. I could go on, bro.
To tell a lie this ridiculous, and to tell it over and over and over again.
Unless it's about, like, everyone that isn't living my way of life. Exactly.
Like the demons from Freyrin. In Freyrin, demons, they just kind of act like humans and they look like humans, but their psychology is completely different. The demons in Freyrin, for them, words are just sounds that they use to deceive humans. They don't actually care about what they're saying. They don't actually have emotions or feelings. They just use words to make it appear like they do in order to trick humans to letting them eat them. By pretending to have morals and pretending to be similar, the humans are tricked into letting their guard down because they take what the demons are telling them at face value without realizing that they're talking to a demon. That's basically the same tactic that the communists are using here. They're taking advantage of the good faith and good nature of the average person and using that against them because the average person would...
Yeah, dude, they love that show so fucking much because you can project anything onto the demons in Freyrin. You can just say like, oh yeah, black people are demons, communists are demons, trans people are demons. You get literally anything. But you can just do anything.
Exactly what Hinkle's doing. Jackson Hinkle knows darn well that what he's saying here is a lie. I can guarantee you that the chances are very close to zero that Hinkle does not know that he is just posting skylines of special economic zones in the end of the 20th century in China. He has been in the business and politics and history long enough to be perfectly well versed enough in the history of China to know darn well that what he is saying is not true. He knows that these posts are nothing more than ridiculous propaganda for his ideology. And the reason he posts anyway is simply because he knows that there's enough gullible people out there who will fall for it. Because ultimately Hinkle is just a grifter. He gains the algorithm by making outlandish claims, fools people into giving him money by being...
That I sort of agree with, like, because I said that earlier. But if he is a grifter, he's a failed grifter. So I don't really know. And like he failed for very obvious reasons. So like I don't know what he was thinking. No matter what he is, he's a genuine communist. He's a grifter. I don't know. What was his plan? It makes no sense to me. He just pissed everyone off.
So that's all I have to say. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And if you like my content, you can support me on Profile.
It's like Jackson Hinkle living his life. It must be like when you play The Walking Dead, and you get that message in the top left corner. It's like everyone disliked that. Everyone hated that. All right. Anyway, that was a pretty stupid video, Mentis. I like that. I like that a lot. You need to make more shit like that, bro. That was good.